The movie starts on the border of China, where a young woman named May passes through a checkpoint carrying a colorful lunchbox. Later, she gets to her house in Hong Kong and carefully unpacks the box. She throws away most of the food, but she leaves one small item of food, similar to an orange pulp. She washes it in a bowl of water and eats it raw like an animal. The next morning, the former TV actress, Mrs. Lee, comes to the area in search of May's house. After blocking narrow streets, she finally finds him and meets him inside. When they sit down, May jokingly asks her guest to guess her age. Mr. Lee sometimes looks at her and guesses that she must be 30, but May laughs at the answer and admits that she is much older, so old that everyone around her called her aunt. I knew people who were even aunts even before birth, so it really doesn't mean anything. After that, we finally found out the reason for her visit. Once a famous star, the beauty of Mrs. Lee was her greatest care, and her husband was devoted to her. But now the years are catching up with us, and she is afraid to lose her appearance and manliness. Mrs. Lee learns through her sources that Palmen, his aunt, works better than any other cosmetics. To look younger, she wants to try them, hoping to keep her rich husband Mr. Lee by her side. Soon May enters the kitchen to cook palmini. She explains that her secret ingredient not only improves the appearance, but also stops aging from the inside. Then May uses all her experience to make palmini with special accuracy. When they are ready, she serves her to a guest, calling her to eat them while they are warm. But as soon as Mrs. Lee bites off the first piece, an uncomfortable pause occurs. This is because of the taste is not very good, and one palmini even spills on the floor. But May calmly picks it up and calms her guest, calling her to focus on the result. Have you seen the substance that people encounter much worse because of this? She claims that her palmini provide youthfulness that no other road of cosmetics can provide. Inspired by her words, Mrs. Lee blinks her eyes and begins to swallow palmini. The scene goes to Mr. Lee, who swims in the pool and flirts with women around him. After swimming, he sits by the pool and receives a message from a young woman. His behavior becomes impolite when he begins commenting on her. At some points, he breaks an egg and eats something unusual from the inside. Mrs. Lee watches everything that happens from the window. She is clearly worried about her husband's actions and what it means for the relationship. Later, May visits the hospital and meets the doctor. The last one gives her the box, but says that she cannot continue to supply the ingredient as before. May is a little upset about this, but does not say a word and quietly goes. The next day, Mrs. Lee visits May again for more palmini. During their conversation, she asks what kind of secret ingredient it is, to which May carelessly explains that she uses meat. Mrs. Lee takes it as an obvious joke and does not ask any additional questions. Shortly after this, the palmini are ready and Mrs. Lee eats them with pleasure. The scene suddenly changes as we see how Mr. Lee had a relationship with the young masseuse in the hotel. It seems that he is very happy when he suddenly receives a call from his wife, Mrs. Lee. The man tells her that he is busy now and has an important meeting. Later, when he returns home, Mrs. Lee again tries to draw his attention. She suggests that they should spend some time together on the occasion of their 15th anniversary. But her husband, it seems, has other plans and says that he needs to go to an important business trip. Not that Mrs. Lee does not know what this business trip is about, but she cannot do anything because her husband gives her a check of a huge amount and asks her to enjoy it. If everything continues in the same way, she will lose her husband and the luxurious life that is associated with him. As time goes on, Mrs. Lee begins to visit May more often. The same palmini that used to seem strange to her, now she's not forced to eat them. Mrs. Lee even begins to give culinary advice to make palmini tastier. For example, remember that these are fruits. A few days pass and May begins to notice a lot changes in her client. Mrs. Lee's skin looks younger and elastic, and wrinkles around the eyes also disappear. However, the extreme impatient Mrs. Lee cannot wait a few months because she's afraid that by that time she'll lose her husband. She begs May to do something radical that will bring her great changes in a short period of time. May tells her that to continue eating palmini, but promises to come up with some alternative method. After a while, immediately after Mrs. Lee leaves, a middle-aged woman comes with her daughter Kate. The mother heard that May used to be one of the best gynecologists in China and wants her to help Kate. Then it turns out that the girl is now pregnant and her mother cannot afford treatment in any hospital. We also find out her mother is ready to have an abortion. However, May refuses to do this because Kate has too little fruit for 5 months. Instead, she sends them to an illegal clinic where such procedures are carried out. May is also connected with the hospital, but not as a gynecologist or in any other professional quality. She actually takes unborn fruits from the clinic and pours their flesh into her palmini. This is a secret ingredient, the magic of her eternal youth. Well, that's like paprika. On the other hand, Mrs. Lee is looking for a hotel where her husband stays during his business trip. She quickly realizes that he has an affair with the masseuse. Defeated by the betrayal of her husband, Mrs. Lee takes May to her home, where they talk openly. They talk about their marital life, and Mrs. Lee finally confesses. She confesses that she wants to start a family, but for some reason she cannot. In addition, her husband meets someone younger and more beautiful than her. Mrs. Lee again begs May to find a solution that could bring her youth back overnight. On the other hand, Kate's condition also deteriorates every day. The next day, May finally undergoes a risky procedure in her own apartment. She does not use any anesthetics during the operation and successfully does it. All the others that she used in her palmony were a maximum of a month old. The next day, Mrs. Lee visits May, who promises to cook her palmony, which will make her much younger in a matter of hours. Then May enters the kitchen and takes out a 5-month plea. While she is busy minching the meat, Mrs. Lee decides to take a look. The poor woman is horrified when she realizes that May did not lie about the meat. This forces her to immediately run away from the apartment. However, as soon as she gets outside, Mrs. Lee begins to think about the consequences. Her beauty and youth are the only thing that keeps her married. She cannot afford to lose her husband and the luxurious life that is associated with it. So she returns to the apartment, where she watches May cook palmoni and then eats them with great interest. This is paprika. After a few hours, Mrs. Lee begins to see changes in her body. Now she feels more enthusiastic and has a steady pace. Everything gets even better when she returns home and Mr. Lee praises her beauty. After a long time, the husband and wife fall in love with each other. In another place, young Kate and her mother takes a bus home. She loses so much blood and that she soon loses consciousness and falls on the road. Unfortunately, she dies at the hands of her mother. On the other hand, Mrs. Lee arranges a party for her friends, trying to show off her newly found beauty. She quickly gains this recognition, but because everyone admires her young appearance. However, things starts to go downhill when her friends complain about the terrible fish smell coming from her. Mrs. Lee is confused that she quickly rushes to bathroom and locks herself in. She calls May and asks her heart to heart which plate they put in the last dumplings. She also threatens to inform the police about this if May does not solve this problem. Mrs. Lee, not knowing her, eavesdrop on the conversation all the time. Returning to the phone, May confesses that she uses the plate to start the process and assures her that the side effects will soon go away. Mrs. Lee is still unconscious, but she has no choice but to wait. So she starts watching her old TV episodes. Later in that evening, Mr. Lee visits May and asks about her illegal business. She tells him that it's not just a pot with dumplings and asks him to get comfortable inside. Then she starts cooking dumplings, explaining to Mr. Lee the advantages of cannibalism and how it was celebrated in the past. After May finishes cooking dumplings, she gives them to Mr. Lee. He begins to eat them without any hesitation and even, it seems, is interested in her. May notices this and begins to tempt the old businessman. She confesses that she is actually 60 years old and she looks so young thanks to her dumplings. Shortly after Mr. Lee finishes eating dumplings, he gets hold of May. Their sessions do not interrupt for a long time. The call from Mrs. Lee, who suspiciously asks May for more dumplings. However, the latter ignores this request and returns. The next day, Mrs. Lee visits the hospital and explains her problem with the unpleasant smell, but the doctor simply advises her to stay at home and eat nutritious food. Just when Mrs. Lee is about to return home, she notices that young masseuse. Mrs. Lee tells the woman and soon realizes that she is pregnant. Fearing for a future relationship, Mrs. Lee begins to walk the streets, constantly sobbing. Shortly after that, she finds May in the hairdresser's and begs her to give her dumplings. Mrs. Lee also assures her that the money is not a problem and gives her a huge check. However, May ignores her and coldly says there's no more dumplings. Mrs. Lee is overwhelmed by this sudden change in behavior and runs out of the salon. A few seconds after her departure, Mr. Lee calls May and asks her to meet in private. This scene changes, and we see two policemen rushing to Kate's apartment. They find her mother with a knife covered in blood. It turns out that the woman stabbed her husband to death for what he did to their daughter. This terrible news soon reaches May, who immediately leaves her apartment with all her belongings. When Mrs. Lee later visits May's apartment, she discovers that there's a police raid. After that, Mrs. Lee returns to the hospital, where she's looking for a young masseuse who says that she's pregnant, and Mr. Lee promised to pay her a lot of money if she gives birth to a healthy child. Mrs. Lee immediately steals the news and remembers that she wants the child to have an abortion. Instead, she's ready to pay twice as much as her husband promised. The masseuse immediately agrees to the offer, and we see how Mrs. Lee asks her daughter not to take any drugs during the abortion. Now it is obvious that she wants to make her own dumplings to preserve her beauty. That's how this film comes to an end, when May carefully walks the streets with her belongings, while Mrs. Lee is seen chopping wood to make dumplings for herself.